May be seated. Thank you, praise team, for creating this atmosphere of celebration. I will not keep you long tonight in terms of my preaching, but I want to give you a very simple word tonight. And the word is what an incredible time it is to be a part of Truth Church. This is our destiny. This is our time. This is our purpose. This is our moment. And we have got to give everything we've got into this time that God has ordained and destined this time for us. Attendance is up. Attendance in every service is up. Diversity is up. We're doing more activities. There's more expectation. There's more optimism. There's more leaders. There's more participants. There's more meaningful metrics. Everything that you look at that's happening at Truth Church is going up. It is an incredible, incredible time to be a part of this church. This is your opportunity. This is your opportunity. It is your opportunity for growth. It is your opportunity for development. And I would even go as far to say it is your opportunity to prosper, although the prosper part isn't as interesting to me as your development and your growth and your opportunity to contribute. It would be a mistake to think that comparing oneself with what we have in front of us versus what was behind us, it would be a mistake to say that we compare ourselves against the past. It is a similar mistake that you would make if you were to compare your parenting with the parenting of your children. It would be a travesty if my children did not parent better than I parented. It would be a travesty if the people who follow my leadership in the businesses that I have led, it would be a travesty if they didn't lead better, if they didn't deliver better results, if they didn't take the organization farther, if they didn't create more leaders, if they didn't create better outcomes. It would be a failure of my leadership. And so make no mistake as I talk tonight about the progress and where we are as a church, that this is not an implication in terms of the past, but it is an optimism and an expectation for the future. This is your opportunity. If you have been waiting to contribute, if you have been wondering, where can I contribute into the kingdom of God? Where's that niche? Where's that space? Where's my opportunity? This is your opportunity. We are doing more activities. There are more places for your gifts to be present. There are more places for you to lead. There are more places for you to donate your time, your effort, whatever it is. This is your opportunity to contribute. And this is your opportunity to grow. And I don't say this with condemnation, but if you have been a member of this church for many years and you've wondered, when am I going to be something more? When am I going to grow? When am I going to develop? This is your time. This is a unique opportunity. And I've experienced, having been here for 40 years or so, I have seen the sovereign waves of God and the revivals that have come and the opportunities that have presented themselves not only for my own development and my growth, but for the growth of the kingdom of God. I believe that this is one of those distinct sovereign moments. That this isn't just a happenstance event, that it's just a bunch of people that are collectively together that have some optimism, or that things are going good and therefore there's an opportunity. I believe that this is a sovereign, distinct time in the history of Truth Church. And like we talk about, for those who have been here for many years, Tina Walls, you will remember this as we talked about the days of, I'll call him Don Charlton, and maybe that's not the way to categorize, but that whole wave of people that came in, Chris Bentley, Don Charlton, and all those people, and you were in some ways part of that wave. And the revival that happened during that time, it was unique, it was distinct, it was providential, it was miraculous. Lives were changed. People that were in drugs, people whose lives were flaming out, people that had no hope for a future, people that didn't know what tomorrow would bring. God transformed their lives. And it changed the complexion of this church. And it created the church that we enjoy today. That church, many, many years ago, it was a sovereign move of God. And this world is, I believe, in another tectonic shift. And the last couple years have been interesting, and we could talk about that, but I really don't want to. But I would say that I have seen and experienced more than I would have anticipated. That the changes that happened over this time frame I would not have predicted. I wouldn't have predicted them in the first month, the 6th month, or the 12th month. I was surprised every few months. But the world is changing in a major way. If you think about the history of the world, we basically spent our history arguing about who's God and whose land. That was kind of, you want to sum up the history of the world? We're fighting over who's God and whose land. And what's happening now is this shift in what we argue about. It's not simply about who's God and whose land, but we're having ideological conflicts like we've never had before, certainly in my lifetime, where we argue about what is gender, when we have environmental arguments, when we have economic arguments. We are arguing about virtually everything. Everything that we thought was settled, everything that we thought was a priori, everything that we thought had judicial notice, as they call it in legal terms. Those things that we thought were settled are no longer settled. And we're asking ourselves questions, and we're understanding our world differently and seeing our world differently. And what this creates for us is opportunity. What this creates for Truth Church is an opportunity that is so unique and so providential and requires all of us to be present, to be vested, to be contributing, to find our place, because this time will come and go. It's a bad comparison, but having lived through economic cycles, and I've seen cycles, and I thought, boy, I should have done something at that moment. And then the cycle passes, and you wait another 10 or 15 years. And I don't know how long this time will last, but there's something precious going on at Truth Church. There's something unique that's happening at Truth Church. And this is your opportunity to participate. There's a guy who wrote a book, Yuval Harari, and he wrote Homo Deus, and he wrote another one called Homo Sapiens. And he asks this question: what was the most influential discovery, creation or invention of the 20th century? And he says it's an extremely challenging question because of the medical advantages that we've seen, like antibiotics, the technological advances we've seen, like computers, and even somewhat he might argue, and he does argue, are ideological advances like feminism. And then he asks the question again, and he says, what are the significant contributions that religion have made? And he says the question is equally as difficult. Not because of all the choices, but because of the dearth of choices, the shortage of choices. And that is so intellectually incredibly offensive to me. It doesn't just offend my sensibilities from a Christian perspective, but if you are a thinking human being, it should offend your sensibilities intellectually. Look, I understand technology, and trains are a wonderful thing. Trains are great for getting people and cargo across the country. But trains aren't so good if you're loading people in them to gas chambers. Medicine's not so good if you're practicing infanticide. Technology isn't so good if you're using it to create genocide. I am offended at the thought that someone could actually come up with a thesis that technology is responsible for the progress of society. It is intellectually bankrupt. Intellectually bankrupt. I don't care what technology, but technology in the wrong hands. Technology with a broken brain and immorality is not good for society. The only reason technology works is because men and women who are inspired by their maker to do more, to contribute, to develop, to advance, to improve the lot of humanity. That is where technology shines. Technology will never shine based on its bits and bytes or its molecular structure or its interestingness. Technology only works when people who are right thinking can bring morality to bear. I'm offended by the thought that technology is responsible for the progress of humanity. And I'm offended when people, and I'm so tired of this tripe, this line that comes out over and over and over again. And maybe I'm preaching a little bit angry tonight, and it probably was not my intention to do that. But I'm offended intellectually when people say what Christianity has done for the plight of women. Read your history books. Athenian law required that in order for a female slave to testify in court, she could only testify if she was tortured. Women were the product of men's whims. They were neither human but mere property. And then a philosophy came around that said something crazy like, husbands, love your wives. And I'm tired of people saying, yeah, the church has kept women down for so many years. No, the church, the principles of God are what elevated society. Across every scope, across every idea, across every axis, it was the principles of God. Truth, fair play, forgiveness, love. And I could go on and on and on. There's a book about the 10 books that messed up the world. The title's a little bit differently. But essentially, it's the Machiavellis, it's the Nietzsches, it's the Mein Kampfs, it's the Communist Manifestos, it's the Alfred Kinsleys that have destroyed families, that have destroyed economies, that have created wars, that have created genocides. These are the ideas of secularism. And it's time for the church to stand up. It's time for the church to come alive. It's time for the church to raise its voice. It's time for the church to recognize the intellectual offense of what we hear today. I refuse to be kowtowed by this world, by the intellectual weakness of their arguments. The church, the principles of God have done more for society, have done more for humanity than any other single contributor to society. Single-handedly. Full pause. Period. And to argue otherwise is a fool's errand. It's a crazy time. It's a crazy time. What happens in a world where and this is possible, where we can control the voters. We can control what people think. And I'm not talking mind melding, but the way we think about technology and the way we use technology and the way that we use groupthink, the way to influence customers, the way to influence voters, the way to influence thought, the way to influence the narrative. And all of these things are happening today. And it's a crazy time. In 2016, 62 of the richest people in the world had more net worth than 3.5 billion of the poorest people in the world. How do you govern a world? How do you govern a society where 62 people have more wealth than 3.5 billion? And the idea might be, well, let's just do a redistribution of wealth, or let's do this, or let's come up with all these harebrained schemes about how we're going to solve the earth's problems. In 2010, on May 6th in 2010, at 2:42 in the afternoon, the Dow Jones dropped 1,000 points, and $1 trillion worth of value was erased from people's portfolios. 6 minutes later, it was all back in. $1 trillion. How do you build a society for that? How do you build a society when things like computers and technology can do more than humans can do? What do you do in a world where people have lost their value because computers can do better? They've taken cancer prognoses and they've used algorithms to look at x-rays of lungs, and overwhelmingly the algorithm was right 90% of the time. Humans were right 50% of the time. In pharmaceuticals in the United States, 1.7% of all pharmaceutical prescriptions are incorrect. That's 50 million prescriptions a year in the United States. When a computer does it, they can go 2 million, 3 million without an error. How do you build a society to deal with that? How do you create a society when all of a sudden technology has more value than people? When technology can do more than people can do? How do you build a society? How do you build a society when their agency, where people's agency no longer exists, that the collective views override people's own agency, where you no longer have personal choice, but all of a sudden collectivism overrides that? How do you deal with that? How do you build a society around that? What's your great idea for that? And what do you do when truth becomes relative? These are challenging problems we face in our world. And the only answer is in Jesus Christ. And I don't say that loosely or flippantly or easily, as if I'm just some weak-minded individual that's just sort of, fallen into this thing and, haven't done the research or haven't put the thought into it or haven't done the heavy lifting around thinking about this. But when I look at this world and I look at the challenges we face, the only hope is Jesus Christ. The only hope. Technology first becomes our oracle, then our agent, and then our sovereign. It's our oracle because it tells us what to do. Then it becomes our agent, and it does it for us. And ultimately, it becomes our sovereign, and we serve it. I see young people today, and they're confused about life. They're confused about what to do. They're confused about what to think. But the answer is in Jesus Christ. John chapter 9, verse 4 says, "We must work the works of him who sent us. While it is day, night is coming when no one can work." This is our opportunity. This is, I believe, without hyperbole, Truth Church's inflection point. That it's our opportunity to give, to contribute, to invest ourselves and our lives in what matters. 1 Corinthians 6:2 says, "For he says, in a favorable time I listen to you, and in a day of salvation I help you. Behold, now is that favorable time." That now is the day of salvation. And I don't feel like I can do it justice tonight. I'm just one voice, one person with some ideas. But as I look at the last couple years, I am so thankful and so thrilled with the gift of the Walkers, their children. You have come to a city, to a church, and I believe to a inflection point of our city and of our church. And I don't want to put more on you than you can bear, but we are so thankful that you're here. We're thankful for your leadership. We're thankful for your vision. We're thankful for your commitment to all that this represents. This is, many of us, this is our lives. We have invested everything in this. This will be my legacy if there's such a thing to be called. This is where I have put the most effort, the most money, the most time. This has been a great commitment. And I want to encourage all of us to recognize the moment that we're in today. I was looking and thinking about Israel's and sort of those inflection points in the history of Israel. And there's many that you could think of and what we could talk about tonight. But the one that stood out for me is sort of that most monumental, the biggest one was the Exodus. It was sort of, as I thought about this and I read the Exodus story again and thought about the story and what it meant, and it felt like there was five hallmarks of their opportunity, 5 things that represented the hallmark, the opportunity that was set before them. And in maybe no particular order, or maybe in some order, that the first one is that they had a significant contrast. Exodus chapter 1, verse 13 says that they made the people to work ruthlessly. In verse 16, we learn that there was an expectation of infanticide, the killing of every male child, that they had this moment of contrast unlike any other opportunity maybe they'd ever have. 400 years, we argue, some people say it's 430, some people say it's less. There's lots of discussion, but it was a few hundred years of slavery. And they had this contrast of the opportunity that was in front of them and the slavery that was behind them. And when I look at our world and where we are in our world, and I'll sort of go back and forth between these two, but when I look at our world, the contrast that exists between what we believe and how we understand our world and how we live within our world, the contrast is so stark. I was thinking this weekend about safe drug sites. This idea that you could create safe drug sites in order to reduce drug overdoses. Imagine a world if I told you 5 years ago, we're gonna start a new driver training program. It's a safe driving program. It's a simple program. Basically what we do is we take alcoholics and we teach them how to drive drunk. Right? It's a harm reduction program. See, if we could just teach alcoholics how to drive drunk, then we'd solve all our problems. And it's ludicrous to the mind, and yet somehow we think that safe drug sites are a solution to an overdose problem. And the contrast of the solutions to the problems of life are they're just mind-boggling. This is our opportunity because of the contrast. This is the moment where you can say, yeah, 2,000 people dying in BC. I know there's statistics because I've spent some time there. 2,000 people dying of drug overdoses. More than other medical events that seem to attract more attention and billions of dollars. And yet 2,000 lives leave the planet. And we think the answer is just make it safe. It's crazy. The second one is they had great experience and proof. The plagues, the favor of the Egyptians. The Bible talks about that the Egyptians will give you all this stuff on your way out. They're going to load you up with stuff. And of course, they did. The plagues, the provisions that even in their disobedience, the provision that God provided them, the proof of God's blessing, his miraculous intervention. And I think about us, and I think about the church and the transformation that's happened in my life, and the transformation that's happened in your life, and the transformation of lives of visitors and people that have been attending this church. And we see this day after day, service after service, people coming in and having their lives changed. It's transformative. And so the proof, the contrast and the proof. And the third one I look at again when I think about the Exodus, they had this almost blank slate, this opportunity to create their new laws and new structure, new vision, new potential. There was a divine acceleration that happened. They were going to leave slavery and set up an entire new society. And everything could be created. Everything was possible. And that's exactly what I feel like Truth Church has been for the last couple years. That all of a sudden this art of the possible, that things we had maybe never thought of, or Stampede event. This is, I believe, recognized in the city as a premier event. That it is worthy of media coverage. It is worthy of the Stampede board knowing about. This is fabulous, and it's unique, and it's differentiated, and it's ours. What do we want to do? What can we imagine? What are the possibilities? One of the things I love about Pastor Walker is his willingness for ideation. Tell me something. Give me an idea. What can we do next? Help me understand where we can invest. Show me things. He's so open to possibility. And if you've been wondering and worried and, God, where do I fit and what can I do? Find a place. This is the opportunity. And I don't want to say it's a blank slate. I would be overstepping to say it's a blank slate. There are parameters, of course there are. But the freedom that I have felt and the excitement I've seen as programs have started and people have become involved and people that hadn't participated in times past that are participating now, it's thrilling, it's exciting, it's God's plan for Truth Church. Number 4, the significant resources that they had. Deuteronomy 8:7 through 10. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land that has brooks of waters and fountains and flowing streams. There's bread without scarcity and a land of olive trees, and there's honey and vines. And there was so much abundance. And I feel like that's exactly where we are at Truth Church. When I think about the technology investments that we've made, the podcasting equipment so that our voice can go further and we can go across different venues. It's not just, if you're not here at 615 North Mount Drive at 7:30 on Wednesday night, you're going to miss it. But there are all these other expressions. There's all these other avenues of expression that Pastor Walker has created for the Word of God to go out. So the technology, the podcasting, departmental budgets, the time, the creativity, the stamping, all of this abundance. I just see abundance everywhere I look. That's our opportunity. That's our opportunity. And then lastly, I would say the unity and the expectation. In Joshua 24:17 through 18, the people, they had coalesced behind Joshua and his leadership. And they gave sort of this this little history lesson, and they recalled how that they came out of slavery and the great signs and how God had preserved them through all of that and drove out all of the enemies. And then they recommitted the unity. They recommitted themselves to the vision and to the opportunity that was in front of them. Let's stand this evening. And every time I come to service, I feel this overwhelming sense of expectation and unity. That we come to this place Wednesday, Sunday morning, and Sunday night, and we believe God's going to do something significant. I come to service believing that I'm going to hear the Word of God. I come to service believing that there are going to be new faces. I come to God believing, or come to service believing that God's heard my prayers, that God's going to answer my prayers. I come to service believing that there are lives that are going to be transformed. I come to service believing lives are going to be healed, that sickness is going to fall off the lives of people. That's the expectation I have. And so for tonight, I want to reinvite you. I want to end this service in celebration as we began the service. What an incredible, incredible time to be a part of Truth Church. I love Truth Church.